My name is Elowen Hart, and for years I believed quiet was the same thing as safety. The morning I learned it wasn't, the apartment was all pale winter, glass cool under my palm, kettle breathing softly, rain standing in pearl drops on the balcony rail. I was mending a loose seam in my husband's navy blazer before his business trip when the needle snagged on something stiff. My thread pulled, and a tiny envelope slid into my lap like a secret deciding to be found. Inside was a glossy 4x6. The first thing I noticed wasn't the people but the light, late afternoon gold bending over a hotel patio, glittering through water rings on a small metal table. Then my eye focused. There was my husband, Marcus, jaw unshaven, hand cradling a wineglass, leaning in so close his cheek nearly brushed the hair of a woman I recognized from holiday parties and LinkedIn congratulations. Her name was Vera. She wore a dress I remembered admiring in a shop window, the one I told myself I'd buy when the bakery's spring orders stabilized. I heard the kettle click off like it had made up its mind. I didn't shout. My heartbeat simply stepped to a steadier, harder rhythm, the kind you feel in your teeth. For a long time I sat at our dining table, the oak one with a little scorch on the edge from our first Thanksgiving, holding the photo carefully by its corners, as if fingerprints might turn a truth into a misunderstanding. When Marcus came out of the shower, steam ghosted into the hallway. He kissed the crown of my head, smelled of cedar and clean water, and asked if I'd seen his blue tie. I set the photo on the table between us. The tie question withered. He laughed the laugh of someone who thinks denial works like Windex. You're being paranoid, he said, and I watched the word choose its place in the room. Paranoid. The syllables hung like a small bruise, insisting they were nothing to fuss over. He reached for the photo, but I slid it back into its envelope and into my apron pocket. It's not what you think, he added, softening his voice to the one he used when a cake collapsed and I swore I'd never bake again. We were at a client thing. Everyone was there. In the lining of your jacket? I asked. He shrugged. Someone must have slipped it in. A joke. Vera's team is playful. Rain began again, finer now, tracing the glass with threads of silver. I watched him knot the blue tie, his fingers quick, practiced. I thought of the quiet rooms we had made together, the winter garlands, the half-painted hallway we promised to finish in spring. The kettle clicked again, though I hadn't turned it on. Maybe it was cooling, contracting. Maybe it was the sound of something deciding to take up less space. Be reasonable, he said. Don't make up a story from one picture. I wanted to be reasonable more than anything. Reasonable lives are tidy. They run on lists and clean counters and repeatable recipes. But the image in my pocket made a noise louder than reason. It sounded like a hinge turning. When he left for the office, trip postponed suddenly, he said, because of weather in Dallas, I stood very still and listened to the apartment settle. A single car swished past on the street below. Someone upstairs watered plants, the drip hit concrete, irregular and patient. I laid the photo flat on the table and took 3 deep breaths that felt borrowed from a different woman. Then I washed my hands, tied on my bakery apron, and walked out into the rain with the envelope in my pocket, the kind of quiet you carry when you know it won't last. The bakery opened at 7. By 8 the bell had chimed enough times to unspool a morning, construction workers with coffee and cinnamon knots, a nurse from the clinic across the street who loved the lemon tartlets, Mrs. Iden, who never learned my name but always asked after, your fine husband. The ovens hummed, a low purr in the bones of the building. Flour dust floated in the air like snow that had lost interest in falling. I moved on instinct. Measure, fold, rest. A good dough forgives agitation but not neglect. I thought about that as I watched butter streak into satin through the dough's layers, and again when my assistant Mila whispered, everything okay, without looking directly at me. I smiled the smile people expect from the owner of a place with pale blue walls and a glass case full of small miracles. I told myself that small miracles still counted, even when big ones failed. Between orders I wiped the counter twice, then a third time. I texted my mother a photo of the raspberry crustadas, wrote, "Wish you were here," and erased it. I left the message empty, just the photo, a fact without commentary, then erased even that draft. I had built the bakery from a card table at a farmer's market, had left a safe non-profit job, had signed a lease I could barely afford in a neighborhood everyone called up and coming, as if it were a train that might skip our stop. I had negotiated with vendors and cried into invoices. I had taught classes on Sunday afternoons and sent people home with dough caught under their nails. The bakery was the room where the truest parts of me were welcome. I looked at my reflection in the pastry case and wondered how much of me was outside the glass and how much had crept in behind it. At noon Marcus texted, "Long day. Grab dinner out." 7. The message arrived as a photo of a child's birthday cake I'd made last year flashed in my memories, small candles, a ring of strawberries like a crown. I typed "sure" and didn't press send. I pressed the home button, and the unsent message went back to where quiet lives. What did I risk losing? Not only a marriage. There is a kind of stability your life presses its back against so often you forget it's a wall. Family calls at holidays that assume plural pronouns. The easy shorthand of 2 toothbrushes. The unfussy courage of knowing someone else will memorize the grocery list and remember to charge the car. Reputation, too, the way a woman is asked to carry her own heartbreak along with the weight of the story everyone else tells about it. Elowen the baker, whose husband strayed, poor thing. Elowen the woman who couldn't keep him. Elowen who imagined things. Around 3, a client came in for a tasting, wedding in May, peonies on the tables. She brought a binder of samples and swatches. "We love clean lines," she said, tapping a photo, "no drama." I laughed, the sound too bright. "That's my specialty," I said. They chose a lemon elderflower with an almond crumb, 4 tiers. When they left, I wrote their deposit into the ledger with a careful hand. Numbers line up, or they don't. There's mercy in that bluntness. I flipped back a month and looked at the steady columns, a life that added up when you wrote it down. Marcus arrived at the bakery before closing. He came around back, the way he used to, lifting the latch I always forget to fix. He leaned in the doorway, tie loosened, palms open. "Let's not turn this into something it isn't," he said. "We're good, oh. We have a good thing." I poured him a coffee, black. The steam rose in a ribbon. "I'm not turning it into anything," I said. "I'm watching." He glanced at the kitchen, the racks, the cooling sheets, the clipped recipe cards. "This place," he said, almost tenderly. "It matters." "It does," I said. "That's why I'm watching." He smiled as if we'd agreed on something, some truce that meant we could return to our old verbs. He kissed my temple like he had 1,400 times and left with a box of leftover scones for his office. The bell over the front door made its small silver noise, and the bakery was mine again. I went to the sink and turned on the tap. The water ran hot, filling the room with a low hiss. I washed bowls we'd already cleaned, then dried them, then washed them again. I wasn't stalling, or maybe I was. Quiet can be a comfort and a trap. It holds you in place so you don't have to learn the shape of your fear. At home, I took the envelope from my apron pocket and slid it under the bottom drawer of my nightstand. The wood whispered shut. I lay on my side of the bed and listened, the radiator clicking, a neighbor's laughter folding down the hall, the elevator's cables humming. I counted my breaths, 1, 2, 10, 20. Until the number itself lost its meaning and I fell asleep with my hands curled like I was still holding something careful by its corners. The next morning I opened the bakery at 5 and, before the ovens were fully awake, walked 2 blocks to the copy shop with its always-on neon open casting the sidewalk in a soft pink hum. I made 3 photocopies of the photo, one for a safe place at the bakery, one for my purse, one for a folder I labeled in pencil, small and plain, records. On the way back, the sky was the domestic blue of a dish left to soak overnight. Streetlights clicked off in sequence. I thought of the lies we call harmless, the kind too small to trip on, and wondered which ones had taught Marcus his confidence. At 9, while a batch of sourdough loaves took their slow rise, I logged into our joint bank account from the office laptop. I told myself I was checking Tuesday's payroll. Numbers lined up the way numbers do, but an unfamiliar transfer made a dark door in the ledger. 2 days earlier, $8,500 had moved out, labeled consulting. We don't use consultants. We call my brother when the dryer squeals. I clicked deeper and found a new account, one not linked to our shared dashboard. It existed in the bank's ecosystem like a private hallway, and money had been flowing through that hallway at regular intervals for months. Smaller transfers, $600 here, $1,200 there, the kind of numbers a life can pretend it doesn't see if it's busy enough frosting cakes and believing the best. I printed the statements. The paper came out warm, edges curled, smelling faintly of toner and decision. I added them to the folder, records. That afternoon, Vera posted a photo to her public account, a field of winter grass, the caption a quote about horizons. The same hotel building from the envelope photo winked in the background, its metal letters catching the light. Intent reveals itself in the casual details, my grandmother used to say when she taught me to read knitting patterns. If you look at how a thing repeats, you see what it wants to be. I made an appointment with a lawyer whose card I kept clipped to my fridge for reasons I had never had to name. He specialized in family law and small business protection. The receptionist's voice was efficient and kind. She fit me in for the next morning. I wrote the time on the back of a delivery slip and tucked it into the folder. When Marcus came home, he set a bag of takeout on the counter, Thai, my favorite when I'm too tired to chew properly. He kissed my shoulder and said, "Long day," in the voice that still worked like a balm on most aches. I imagined asking him about the transfers, about the hotel. I imagined giving him a gentle exit ramp to confession. But intent is a wire, you can pluck it and hear if it's taut. He showered. I took the paper bag to the trash chute, lifted the heavy door, and let the cool air move over my face. In the small steel echo I said out loud, "I see what you're doing." The words sounded practical, like a list item you might cross out once completed. At the lawyer's office the next day, everything was soft gray and glass. The receptionist offered water in a real glass. You can tell how a place values you by the weight of the glass they hand you. Mr. Adelman had warm eyes and a habit of tapping his pen against his lower lip. I laid the photo and the statements on the table between us and told him the facts without adjectives. He listened the way pastry listens to the oven, close enough to know the exact moment change begins. "You've done the most important thing," he said. "You documented. Have you seen any contracts? A lease? Anything else in writing?" I thought of Marcus's coat, the envelope in the lining, how carefully he'd nested one truth inside another. "I've seen his confidence," I said. "That feels like documentation." Adelman smiled, not unkindly. "It usually is. Here's what we'll do." Quietly, he added, as if the word belonged to both of us. "We'll file to freeze movement from the joint business account to any outside accounts without dual authorization. We'll prepare for mediation, not war. And we'll assume he'll deny everything until he's handed his own handwriting. What if he calls me paranoid? Then he's playing an old song. We'll change the station." When I left, the winter light was high and thin. I walked the long way back, past the hotel in the photo. The patio was empty, chairs stacked like questions. The letters on the facade were dull in the noon gray. I stood there until the clouds shifted and a single beam of light slid under the awning and touched the metal table, and for a moment the ring it made looked exactly like a wedding band someone had slipped off to set down. Mediation took place in a conference room with a view of the river and a bowl of peppermint someone had refilled too often. The mediator was a woman with hair pulled back in a calm braid and a voice that made even calendar logistics feel generous. Marcus sat across from me in a suit that had always made me proud. Pride is strange like that, how it can keep its shape even when it's outgrown. "We're here to find clarity," the mediator said. "Not to assign shame." Marcus's lawyer spoke first, generous with words like misunderstanding and amicable. He slid a proposed division of assets across the table that would leave me with the bakery but not the building we were days from closing on, the one we'd planned to convert into a second location with a small classroom in back. Given his projected consulting income, the lawyer said, this arrangement makes sense. His projected what? I asked. Marcus didn't look up. Side work. Short term. The mediator nodded, made a tidy box on her legal pad. The river moved past the windows with its own old patience. Adelman rested his palm on the folder in front of him. "Before we discuss projections," he said mildly, "let's anchor in the present." He opened records and placed 3 things on the table: the bank statements, a printout of the hotel confirmation page he'd subpoenaed after finding the matching date among the transfers, and the photo from the envelope, the original, not a copy. He didn't push them forward dramatically. He placed them like ingredients measured and ready, neat, inevitable. Marcus's jaw tightened the way it does when he drives in city traffic. "This is invasive," he said. "We said we wouldn't do this, Al." "We didn't say anything," I answered, and realized it was true. We hadn't agreed to a story, he'd simply told one at me. The mediator's pen paused mid-note. In the window, the river flashed a reluctant gold. "Intent," Adelman said softly, as if trying out the weight of the word. "Funds moved out of a joint account into a private one without disclosure. A hotel booked under your name during work hours. An ongoing workplace relationship that may violate your firm's policy. Our request is simple: return dissipated funds, equitable division of assets as initially discussed, and a written commitment to cease contact with Ms. Vera during financial disentanglement and any public-facing transition from the marriage. In exchange, we keep everything civil and quiet." The word quiet landed on the table like a folded napkin. It wasn't a threat. It was an offering. Marcus looked at me then, really looked, like a man surprised to find that the house he's been walking through has walls. For a second I saw him search for the right key and come up empty. "You're making a scene," he whispered, the old coaxing edge returning. "This isn't you." "It is," I said, not angry, simply tired of overlooking my own reflection. "It always was. You just liked me better when I used it to make things easy." His lawyer cleared his throat. "We'd like a moment." They took their moment in the hallway, 2 silhouettes under a fluorescent hum. The mediator offered me a peppermint. I declined and took a breath instead, the kind that tastes like a cool room. Adelman kept his gaze on the window. "You're doing fine," he said. When they returned, Marcus nodded once, the kind of nod a man gives when confronted by arithmetic. "We accept," his lawyer said. "With one amendment, the second location's build-out delays are on both parties. No penalties." "Agreed," Adelman said. The mediator wrote the terms down in her even hand. The bowl of peppermints caught the light like a small stained glass window. When it was my turn to sign, my fingers didn't shake. The pen fit between them the way the handle of my offset spatula does, familiar and balanced. I pressed my name in ink and felt the room exhale. On our way out, Marcus stopped at the doorway. "You didn't have to humiliate me," he said, quietly, almost like a plea. I thought of the word paranoid, how softly he had placed it in our kitchen, how it hung there for days. "No one here used that word," I said. Not even you. He stared at the carpet, then at the river. The fluorescent lights flickered once and steadied. For the first time since the envelope slid from the jacket lining, I felt the air in my body make room for something that wasn't dread. It wasn't triumph either. It was simply space. I walked toward the elevator. The doors opened with a sigh, and the river kept going where it was going. Spring came the way it always does in this city, first as rumor, then as sudden proof. The trees on the boulevard outside the bakery opened their fists into green. The window glass warmed under my cloth. I moved the classroom table to the back, where the light laid itself across the wood like a promise, and wrote, "Introduction to Laminated Doughs," on the chalkboard in careful script. I signed the papers for the second location in May. I kept the classroom small and the windows big. On the first day we unlocked the doors. A woman in a yellow raincoat stood in the entry, dripping onto the mat. "I heard you teach people how to make something that takes time," she said. "I need that." "We all do," I answered, and handed her an apron. On a quiet Monday evening, weeks after mediation, I took the records folder from the safe at the back of the bakery. I added the final document, the signed agreement, and then slid the folder into a banker's box with other winter things: pinecone garlands, the copper star we hang over the register in December, a cookbook with spice stains on the custard page. I labeled the box Winter, not legal, not divorce, not betrayal. Winter. A season is something you survive without needing it to apologize. Back at the apartment, mine now, I made tea and opened the balcony door. The city hummed, a soft electric chorus. Across the courtyard, someone tuned a guitar. The first two notes were hesitant, then more sure. I took the photo from the envelope one last time. The light was still pretty, golden in a way that didn't belong to any of us. I studied my own face in the reflection on the glossy surface, not to check for damage but to memorize the woman who had carried a quiet through a room and then set it down. I didn't burn the photo. Drama has never been my gift. I slipped it into a new envelope, unmarked, and placed it at the bottom of a drawer with my passport and a postcard from a seaside town we'd meant to visit. Let it be what it is, a thing that happened. Let it rest under things that will happen next. That night I wrote a letter I wouldn't send. "Dear Marcus," it began, then changed itself to "Dear Former Life," as my pen kept moving. I thanked it for the days when we were kind to each other. I forgave it for teaching me the wrong lesson about quiet. I folded the letter and tucked it into a cookbook on the pantry's top shelf. Let it learn to gather dust beside sugar and flour and olive oil, ordinary things that make other things possible. The next morning, before dawn, I stood at my work table and pressed cold butter into cool dough. The room smelled like patience. The first turn is always a little clumsy. The dough resists, then yields. You wrap it and return it to the fridge and let time do what your hands can't. When I rolled it again, the layers began to show, barely visible but undeniably there, fold after fold, evidence of work no one sees until a crescent flakes apart and a stranger tastes the labor of hours in a moment. Mila arrived, hair in a scarf, cheeks pink from the morning. "You're early," she said. "New recipe," I told her. "Or maybe just the old one, done properly." We laughed a little at that, and it was the kind of laugh that lands without echo. By 7, the cases were filled, cardamom buns whose scent braided through the door, croissants layered like the pages of a story, lemon bars with a tartness that made your mouth bright. A man in a gray sweater ordered 2 coffees and a slice of plum cake. As I rang him up, he looked at the classroom sign. "Always wanted to learn that," he said, pointing at the word laminated. "You should come," I said. "It's mostly practice. Practice and patience." He nodded. "Seems useful." "It is," I thought, and slid his change across the counter. In the afternoon, a river of sun ran the length of the floor. I locked the register and took a seat at the classroom table. I wrote a list on the back of a receipt: paint trim, Order more parchment. Call mom. I added, buy peonies when they're cheap. I added, be generous with the truth. I underlined that one. Outside, a bus released its brakes with a sigh, and someone laughed somewhere just out of sight. The air entered and left my lungs the way it should, without argument, without permission. When I closed up, I stood for a moment with my hand on the bakery door, feeling the brushed steel under my palm cool from the day's warmth. The city's evening lights blinked on in small, brave constellations. There are so many ways to be quiet, I thought. Hiding is one. Healing is another. I locked the door, pocketed the key, and walked into the kind of night that doesn't demand a story. It just lets you live.